If you want to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page to gain access to exclusive videos, take part in Q&As, and watch my retrospectives before they go live on YouTube.
Why does V'ger travel to the third planet of the solar system directly ahead?
To find the Creator.
What does V'ger want with the Creator?
To join with him.
We've plotted a course on that cloud, Commander. It will pass into Federation space fairly close to us.
Heading?
Sir, it's on a precise heading for Earth.
Mr. Scout, an alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet. The only starship in interception range is the Enterprise. Ready or not, she launches in 12 hours. I'm taking over the center seat, Will.
You're what?
I'm replacing you as captain of the Enterprise.
You personally are assuming command? May I ask why?
My experience. 5 years out there dealing with unknowns like this.
Admiral, this is an almost totally new Enterprise. You don't know her a tenth as well as I do.
That's why you're staying aboard.
Permission to come aboard, sir.
Spock.
On Vulcan, I began sensing a consciousness from a source more powerful than I have ever encountered. Thought patterns of exactingly perfect order. I believe they emanate from the intruder.
Hello, Ilea.
Dick.
I was stationed on the Lieutenant's home planet some years ago.
I'm sorry.
That you left Delta 4? Or that you didn't even say goodbye?
You ram getting this command on Starfleet's throat. You've used this emergency to get the Enterprise back.
Impulse power, Mr. Sir. Ahead, warp 0.5.
In December of 1979, Star Trek The Motion Picture made its debut, after patient fans waited a decade for a new outing with the original cast. The movie was met with mixed reviews from critics and especially fans of the original show. The film was produced with a very large budget of $46 million, making it one of the most expensive productions, just slightly less than Superman the movie, in which its budget had bloated to $50 million. Star Trek went on to make $139 million worldwide, even with the heavy merchandising such as action figures, comics, the Vectrix video game and trading cards. The box office was a lot lower than Paramount Studios had expected, as they were hoping to achieve numbers like Star Wars and Close Encounters. The final print came together only 2 days before the premiere. The director Robert Wise took the just completed film to its Washington DC opening, but always felt that the theatrical version was only a rough cut of the film he wanted to make. When the original television series was cancelled in 1969, Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry lobbied Paramount to continue the franchise through a film. The success of the series in repeated broadcasts convinced the studio to begin work on a feature film in the mid-70s. A series of writers attempted to craft a suitable epic script, but the attempts did not satisfy Paramount, so the studio scrapped the idea in 1977. Paramount instead wanted Star Trek to return to its roots with a new television series, Star Trek Phase 2. However, later that year, the box office success of Close Encounters of the Third Kind convinced Paramount that maybe going back to the idea of making a film would ultimately be the best way for Star Trek to return. Science fiction films were now the most popular genre in cinema. After the huge success of Star Wars, Paramount couldn't miss the opportunity. In 1978, Paramount announced that double Academy Award winning director Robert Wise would direct a $15 million film, its original agreed budget, and bring it from the small screen to the big screen. Robert Wise was a big name in Hollywood. He had directed some of the most critically acclaimed and influential movies, from The Day the Earth Stood Still, The Haunting, The Sound of Music, and West Side Story. He was someone who could tackle any genre, so it gave the production a lot of credibility. All the original cast members returned, but Leonard Nimoy took more persuading. Nimoy had been dissatisfied with unpaid royalties from the Star Trek show and did not intend to reprise his role. So Spock was left out of the screenplay, and their intention was to introduce a new Vulcan. However, many felt that the film would not be Star Trek without Spock. The producer met with Nimoy and paid him for the lost royalties, and he came on board the production. But he was dissatisfied with the script, which led to an agreement that the final script would need Nimoy's approval. Imagine if Nimoy wasn't involved, could the script have been worse? Persis Khambatta stars as Ilia, the Delta navigator of the Enterprise. Persis signed a 5-year contract in the early stages of the production, when the show was making a comeback on TV. It was considered her big break when it became a feature film, but this meant the end of her 5-year contract. She had to have her head shaved every day for the role. It was a very emotional experience when they first cut off all her hair. Stephen Collins plays Willard Decker, the new commanding officer of the Enterprise. At the start of the film, he is temporarily demoted from captain to science officer when Kirk takes command, and when Spock arrives he is demoted again, the poor bugger. Collins was apparently unfamiliar with the franchise, having never seen an episode of the TV series. The movie opens with 3 Klingon ships approaching a ginormous cloud that seems to be letting off large amounts of energy and radiation. The Klingons fire upon the cloud as it approaches, which proves unsuccessful, and the cloud of energy fires back. Just before they are destroyed, a Starfleet monitoring station detects their distress call and concludes the cloud is moving towards Earth. Captain Kirk persuades Starfleet to let him take control of the newly refurbished Enterprise, after he is informed of the mysterious cloud's approach. But he hasn't logged any space travel for 5 years, and his knowledge of the new ship is limited. Kirk demotes the current Captain Decker, who has been overseeing the refit. Decker is furious at his demotion, claiming Kirk only knows 1/10 of the new ship's design, but Kirk wants him to remain on board as a science officer. The testing of the Enterprise's new system goes poorly. 2 officers attempt to beam aboard are killed, and improperly calibrated engines almost destroy the ship as it pushes into warp speed. The tension between Captain Kirk and Decker increases when Kirk demonstrates his unfamiliarity with the new systems of the Enterprise. Tensions grow between Kirk and Decker, but Bones recognises Kirk's obsession with the Enterprise and suggests his attempts to gain control put everyone at risk. To everyone's surprise, Commander Spock arrives as the replacement science officer, explaining that while on his home world, he felt a consciousness that he believes emanates from the cloud. The Enterprise intercepts the energy cloud but is attacked by an alien vessel within. A probe appears on the bridge, attacks Spock and abducts the navigator Ilia, who recently joined the crew and is close friends with Decker. She is replaced by a robotic doppelganger, a probe sent by V'Ger to study the crew. Decker is distraught over the loss of Ilia and makes attempts to jog Ilia's memories buried within the doppelganger. Spock leaves the Enterprise, boarding the alien vessel in an attempt to create a telepathic mind meld with it. In doing so, he learns that the vessel V'Ger itself is an evolved living machine. In 1983, an extended cut was premiered on the ABC network, showing about 12 minutes of new footage, a cut that was cobbled together very quickly. Many films were extended in length for broadcast in the 80s to help build up revenue for the network, with extended adverts, such as Dune and the Superman films. Luckily for fans, the extended TV cut was released on VHS and Laserdisc, but only in pan and scan for the expensive video format. The director Wise wasn't happy with the added material, as it wasn't done under his supervision. The added scenes were mostly just dialogue. Ones that grabbed my attention was the interaction between Sulu and Ilia. He seems to be very nervous around her and obviously attracted to her, and when Spock has left the Enterprise, you see Kirk suit up and chase after him. Come 2001, Paramount gave Robert Wise the permission to update the film to his original vision. David Fine and Michael Matessino's company, Sharpline Arts, helped revise Wise's film on video and DVD, labelling it the director's cut. Wise considered the theatrical presentation of the film a rough cut due to the rushed nature of the production, thus the film was never screen tested. The production team used the original script, surviving sequence storyboards, memos and the director's recollections. In addition to the cuts in some sequences, 90 new and redesigned computer-generated images were created. You will notice big improvements to Spock's home world, which was originally an unfocused mess of matte paintings. The new matte paintings are far more effective with realising his world. San Francisco was made to look more futuristic, and they greatly improved the explosions in the wormhole sequence when they're about to get hit by an asteroid. They also added an appearing and disappearing past to account for the crew's speedy approach to V'Ger, and improved the opening credits with a change of colour. Special care was taken to seamlessly blend the new effects with the old footage. It's probably the best I've seen when it comes to updating an old film. Most people will be none the wiser, and it just goes to show it can be done. If you watch the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2, you will notice the very obvious new effects that struggle to blend with the old material. If the time and money is there, it is possible to seamlessly blend old and new. The new edition runs at 136 minutes, about 4 minutes longer than the original release. Included on the DVD are the deleted scenes, which had been part of the television cut. The director's cut unfortunately never made its way to Blu-ray, as the new visual effects were not rendered in HD, only in standard definition. The director's cut is not a vast improvement on the original. You are not suddenly going to see the film in an entirely new light, but it's just more slightly polished and flows a bit better. The visual effects for the theatrical cut were under the supervision of the highly talented Douglas Trumbull, with the assistance of industry experts John Dykstra and Richard Jurisic. After the groundbreaking visual effects on Star Wars, the producers on Star Trek needed to match that quality and approached Douglas Trumbull. He had a great reputation in Hollywood and had worked on 2001: A Space Odyssey, but he declined the offer as he was getting tired of being ignored as a director and wanted to move away from being a visual effects supervisor for someone else's production. Paramount hired another effects team to handle Star Trek, called Robert Abel and Associates, but cracks started to show in the team's ability to handle a large-scale feature film. They had conceived a lot of the designs for the movie, but were way behind on schedule. Due to contract obligations, Trumbull was serving as a consultant to Abel and Associates, while effects artist Richard Jurisic acted as a liaison between Abel and Paramount. It was becoming clear that Abel and Associates would not be able to complete the remaining effects on time. Creative differences grew between Abel and Associates and the studio, and by mid-February 1979, the two companies parted ways. The studio had wasted $5 million and a year on Abel and Associates. Trumbull in the meantime was free because his plans to direct a new feature had been cancelled, so the primary responsibility for Star Trek's optical effects passed on to him. In March, the studio offered Trumbull virtually full control if he could get the opticals work completed by December. Trumbull was confident that he could get the work done without a loss of quality, and together with Jurisic, the effects team rushed to the finish line. The effects budget had now climbed to $10 million. Luckily, money was not an issue for Paramount, only time. So to speed up work on the amount of shots needed, Trumbull brought in another visual effects team to handle the workload. John Dykstra had just left ILM and set up his own company, so with 3 top visual effects wizards, things were looking good. Now when you watch Star Trek, especially in HD, you will be instantly impressed and often wowed by its visual beauty. 90% of the effects are still very impressive today. The most eye-popping stuff is during Spock's visit to the entrance of the cloud and the views of its interior. It's mind-blowing stuff and easily tops Douglas's work on 2001. It is sometimes a little difficult to make sense of it all, it's just chock full of imagery you can easily get lost in. Star Trek is just as trippy as 2001. I love it when the Enterprise goes into warp speed. The added effect of it speeding up looks like it's gone to a dimension dominated by disco. Come to think of it, the poster has a bit of a disco vibe to it as well, with its mad colours. The whole film really and its marketing feels very 70s. The Enterprise was redesigned at the request of Robert Wise. Douglas had wished they had built a larger model because he had to commission a special lens for the camera to get close enough to the model to achieve the shots needed. Its introduction at the beginning of the film may be a long sequence, but you can't deny it looks fantastic. The legendary late composer Jerry Goldsmith composes one of his most impressive scores. The film introduces the new theme for the Star Trek franchise, which become the most familiar theme tune to be attached to the Next Generation show and movie series. Jerry would return to Star Trek V, First Contact, Insurrection and Nemesis. Gene Roddenberry had originally wanted Jerry to compose the music for the pilot episode of Star Trek, but he was unavailable. However, when it came time to make the film, Paramount suggested Jerry to Robert Wise and he thought it would be a great idea. He had already worked with the talented composer on the Sand Pebbles, and they got on so well. The score also introduces the new theme for the Klingons, which Jerry would reuse in his later scores for the series. He also takes advantage of electronic synthesizers to help with the themes for the Machine Planet. The score is what really helps a lot of the scenes. The introduction of the Enterprise wouldn't have worked without Jerry's music. He had such a huge task in creating music for all these extended visual effects. Probably even composing the music without anything to work with because of the tight schedule. Jerry also honours his friend Alexander Courage's original theme tune for the show by using it during the film a couple of times when introducing a new scene. A soundtrack featuring the film's music was released in 1979 on LP, together with the film's debut, and at the time was one of Jerry's best-selling scores. Sony Records released an expanded 2-disc edition of the soundtrack in 1998. The album added an additional 21 minutes of music to supplement the original track list. In 2012, the score was released yet again, but in this time in complete form. This 3-CD set contains the complete score plus unreleased alternative and unused cues, in addition to the remastered original 1979 album. The 3-disc set is the one to go for. The quality of the music is fantastic, and it sounds far better than the original mix on the Blu-ray release. It's still available to purchase, and for only $35, it's definitely worth it. Star Trek the Motion Picture has been called a lot of things, like the slow motion picture or the motionless picture. All the criticisms stem from its slow pace and story. The comparisons to 2001 Space Odyssey with its style of direction and execution of the visual effects are very obvious, even down to the film opening with an overture. Although many probably skip those intros and go straight to the main feature. It's a nice addition to have something traditional like an overture, but it doesn't really belong in Star Trek. I personally don't have a problem with its heavy use of elongated visual effects shots, but my major beef with it is its script. It takes forever for the story to get moving along. It's nearly an hour before they actually set off to find V'Ger. The movie is totally void of action or anything particularly exciting. You have the Klingons being taken out, then this disturbing moment when 2 officers get killed in the transport beam. They end up in a wormhole and shoot an asteroid. Then they encounter V'Ger, which steals Ilia. Then nothing much happens until the end, when Decker joins with the computer and it essentially explodes. It has the lovely visuals, but no real energy or dynamic editing to get your heart racing or even to be excited. Just 2 years before with Star Wars, you had these amazing dogfights and a battle on the Death Star, and a year later you had Superman flying on a big screen making everyone believe a man could fly. And with Star Trek you have a lot of talking, then watching the crew stare at stuff. It goes back and forth between them and what they are looking at. It's like watching tennis. I can see why many were disappointed with it. It feels to me like the script is an hour long and has been forcibly stretched out to run at 2 hours. I personally don't think Robert Wise was the best choice as director. He certainly was very talented and had directed some of the most important movies in cinema, but come the late 70s, younger directors seem to have a better grasp of what people wanted, and it feels like he is out of touch. It feels like all the footage with the actors was done 10 years earlier, so the only thing that is contemporary are the groundbreaking effects. The movie is not helped by its production and costume design, which is very hit and miss. For fans of the show, they got to see a far greater scope to the Enterprise and the galaxy, but the overuse of beige and brown makes for a very bland looking future. It just lacks the colour of the original show, and feels very much what was fashionable at the time, and didn't feel like a believable future to me. It's all very Buck Rogers or Logan's Run with its costumes. The actors weren't particularly happy with the outfits, everyone seems to be running around in their PJs, and Captain Kirk can't even make his mind up on what he wants to wear. The redesign of the outfits in Wrath of Khan was certainly a step in the right direction, and proved successful. I still miss the old outfits, but you can't have the original crew running around in these long sleeve shirts. They'd be spending most of the time trying to suck in their guts to hide their bellies. The photography for the main unit is of a high quality. The director of photography said there was not a single easy shot to produce for the picture, as each scene required a special consideration. The bridge was lit with a low density of light to make the console monitors display better. It was difficult for him to frame shots so that reflections of the crew in monitors or light spilling through floor grills were not seen on the final print. There are shots where it's clear they have split the background and foreground with an actor up close and the others in focus behind them. Some of the shots work really well and the others look totally out of focus. 2 shots come to mind. I'm surprised they left them in as they seem like mistakes. I think the idea of a giant world populated by machines searching for their creator is a great premise, but the film doesn't really deliver on what they could have done. In Series 2 of the original show, an episode called The Changeling has a similar plot, so it looks like the writer borrowed a few ideas from that and expanded upon it, but I don't think enough. The idea of one probe being found by this alien race is a totally sound and interesting plot, but I think it would be more interesting if they found a Voyager probe that was actually sent to space instead of making one up. If the visual effects weren't as good as they were, then I believe the film would have been a total disaster. When people look back on it and remember it, they just often discuss the visuals and tend to forget the plot and what happens in it. I wouldn't say it's the worst Star Trek movie, that probably goes to Star Trek V, but I can happily say it's the best looking out of all of them. The effects outdo most of the sequels, but they shouldn't have been the main focus. They should have concentrated on the story and characters. It's the interactions between Kirk, Spock and Bones that people go to see. People love those characters, hence why the series was so popular. The cast all do a great job. Shatner, Nimoy and Kelly are a joy to watch as ever. Stephen Collins as Decker I think impressed me the most. He ends up being the most interesting character. His conflicts with Kirk and his dedication to his job, but also dealing with his love for Ilia. It's a shame he didn't stay with the series. Having him bond with the computer at the end pretty much finished off his character. Star Trek is certainly not a movie for everyone, and I think most just skip the film and go straight to Wrath of Khan when revisiting the series. I like to think it's a film that can be enjoyed when you're in the right mood, on a Sunday afternoon or when you are under the weather and feeling a bit run down. I find it to be a very relaxing and calming movie. Ultimately, it's a flawed film that I think most fans of the series can agree upon, but the movie certainly has its fans. It's now 35 years old, and it still sounds and looks great.